rakan-rakan dari kita dan juga semua yang dapat memberikan waktu untuk mendengar seminar Dr. Chris Jones. Biar saya berikan sedikit latar belakang mengenai saudara Chris Jones ini. Saya telah kenal dia lebih kurang 10 tahun lah, lebih daripada 10 tahun. Beliau menyelesaikan PhD-nya di Atma ketika itu dengan di bawah bimbingan Profesor arwah Profesor Wan Zawawi dan juga saya. Dan kemudian beliau meneruskan kajian di Selatan Siam, khususnya komuniti Melayu Muslim, dan saya menganggap dia sebagai salah seorang pakar yang benar-benar hidup bersama dengan komuniti ini di Selatan Siam, kerana kita tahu banyak penulis dalam sains politik seperti apa nama dia, yang dulu dia bertugas di Hull University. What is the name of the Hull guy who wrote this? Southern Thailand. University of Hull. And then he went to Leeds, and then he went to New York. Tak apalah. Ya, tak apa. Tapi yang saya nak sentuh ini kerana kajian beliau ini walaupun terfokus kepada Selatan Siam, orang Muslim Melayu di Selatan Siam, namun apabila beliau membincangkan perkara ini dari awal-awal lagi, beliau melihat dari perspektif alam Melayu, kerana hubungan Selatan Siam dengan alam Melayu ini sangat rapat, sama ada dari segi sejarahnya ataupun dari segi sekarang, sama ada dari segi jalan halal atau jalan haram. Ya, kerana penyeludupan dari Selatan Siam itu juga sebesar daripada eksportan barangan dari Thailand ke Malaysia. So ini menarik kedudukan Selatan Siam ini dari segi Malaysia. Jadi kita beruntung pagi ini mendapat Chris Joel mengambil kesempatan ini datang ke Malaysia untuk berkongsi dengan kita pandangan beliau, dan berasaskan satu tulisannya yang baru saja terbit di jurnal Malay World and Indonesian Studies di London, ya. Jadi therefore saya titlenya ialah Malay Exiles in Central Thailand. Jadi beliau telah beralih daripada Selatan Siam, fokus empirical dan kerja lapangannya kepada Central Thailand, revisiting the cultural geography of Islam in Thailand and the Malay world's northern diaspora. Ini menarik ini, kerana kita selalu bincang Malay world southern diaspora or central diaspora, but rarely we discuss Malay diaspora at the northern border of the Malay world, so called. So, dan peralihan daripada Selatan Siam ke kawasan Siam atau Thailand, pertengahan Thailand, ini satu perkara yang menarik kerana kita tahu ada tulisan dalam bidang antropologi. Saudara Joel ni pun ahli antropologi yang cukup baik dan banyak penyelidikan yang sungguh mendalam, berlapis-lapis kemampuan beliau menulis dan juga datanya. Jadi hari ini kita berkongsi untuk mendengar pandangan beliau mengenai satu kelompok ulama Melayu, pengamal agama Islam Melayu yang bermastautin di Thailand tengah, bukannya selatan Thailand tapi di tengah Thailand. So Chris, I'm very pleased to welcome you, our old friend and associate at Kita and Atma before, and he has never failed to share his knowledge with us for these many years, whether through his work or through his visits here, but also through his students, whom have gone through Kita at the same time, and we benefited from your research, very much so. So today, all of us here will be waiting to listen and to hear for your latest publication and your latest finding. Thank you, Chris. Please.
Okay.
Take the floor.
Thank you very much for your kind welcome, Shamsul and Prof. Shamsul. And what I'm going to do is I'm getting a bit of help here to make sure that I have got the video on. No one heard that. Okay. So let's start again. I think I'm unmuted now. And just wanted to, we've got a bit of a echo. So we need to unmute one person there. Shall I just keep talking and will this be fixed or how's that? Well, we've still got an echo.
1 minute, please. I just have to switch this off. Sure. You don't need that. This technology doesn't exist during Jurassic time.
Just okay. Hit the lid. No worries. Oh. Okay. So
sorry.
Okay. Good. No problem.
For the necessary disturbance.
No problem. No, that was a good piece of the best comedy is unscripted. Okay, so lovely to be here. Lovely to be back at University Gebangsa, and I would just like to briefly. I'm sure that a number of people have been talking about and remembering Professor Wanzawawi Ibrahim, who passed away recently, and I am not Mr. Current Affairs of all of the tributes given to one, as he insisted on being called. And before I do anything else and say anything else, I want to just briefly pay respect to his memory and to state the obvious that it was an enormous privilege for me to be supervised by both him and by Prof. Shamsul while I was studying at Atma, and it seems like it was a long time ago now, but looking forward to visiting the family this afternoon, inshallah. So thank you very much for the kind comments in your introduction. As moderator, it might be helpful for you to remind me about how many minutes I need to stick to. I would prefer to keep this presentation short because this is based on a publication so that we can have interaction. Can you give me a time that I should aim to stop?
We have to end by 12.
Okay.
And you have 45 minutes.
Okay. Well, I'll take 40 because okay. I think that I'm more interested in getting some discussion going, both with people in the room and those involved in this virtually. I'm one of the rare people who during the pandemic managed to avoid using Zoom that much. I live on a farm in the middle of nowhere in New Zealand where I've been writing furiously. Okay, so as I have already mentioned and how Prof. Shamsul has mentioned, this presentation is based on one of my recent publications, indeed my most recent publication in Indonesia and the Malay world, which is one of the top journals in Malay studies. And I'm wanting to begin to raise the profile about this work, which is something that I have been working on for a while. So, so why don't we just hop in with a picture which I open the article with and which it might be good for us to consider. I'm assuming that everyone can see this picture and a number of you may have a number of observations. We've got a curious juxtaposition of men dressed distinctively in Malay garb. This is, we've got sarongs and baju's and kepiah. I only speak Kelantanese, so I always use local terms for these things. So this photo was taken somewhere between 1910 and 1925. And a Thai scholar included this in an article which curated a number of artifacts. And these Malays were attending an audience offered to them by the 5th reign in the present Chakri dynasty. So we are up to the 10th king in the Chakri dynasty, which started in 1782, and I'll be talking a bit about that history as we go on. So for most people, the sight of Malays congregated in a Buddhist temple anywhere, but are congregated in a Buddhist temple in Patani, in Bangkok, roughly 1,000 kilometers from Bangkok, is somewhat discombobulating. So a number of questions may be asked. What on earth are these Malays doing in a temple? But the question that I really want to ask and have attempted to answer, ask and answer in this paper is how they got to be in Bangkok. And as Prof. Shamsul has mentioned in his introduction, there is just so much written on Muslims in Thailand. I have, for a number of years, I've been diagnosed with some rare neurological disease where I am obsessed with doing bibliographies. I've sought medication, it doesn't work. I've sought professional treatment, which I can't afford, but even if I could afford it, it wouldn't work either. So I've learned to live with the condition. So there's 1,700 items in my bibliography of Thailand and of Muslim minorities in Thailand. And there are many observations one could make about that. The fact that the field of Muslim studies in Thailand is overshadowed by what I would call the obsession with southern security issues. The second is the number of studies that are done on Muslim minorities outside of the Malay majority far south is a problem which I've identified and am interested in rectifying. But I think that a specific way in which I'm interested in responding to what I see as some of the weaknesses in Muslim studies. And it's a lot easier to identify insufficiencies that we see in an area of studies, whatever that may be. It's far easier for us to identify and to set up a straw man and to heroically get our grace out and to dismember it, compared with the more important task, the long-term task of articulating an alternative methodology, which is theoretically sophisticated, empirically rich, and historically grounded. And the empirical elements of the projects that I'm working on and the theoretical elements of the projects that I've undertaken and I'm seeking to complete, and the way in which these empirically grounded and theoretically sophisticated studies are historically grounded, are three things that I'm deeply committed to. And if you take the time to read the short research note, I hope that you will be satisfied with how I've made the start on this. A number of brief comments about my conversation partners. And they are all people whose work I have learned from tremendously. These names will be familiar with you, I assume, but I'd like to read a quote. I'm disastrously dyslexic, which explains. I have an extemporaneous style when I present, and it almost always goes reasonably badly when I try and read. But let's give it a go again. Many of you will know the work of Sumit Mandal, who worked at UKM, I think at ICMAS before he shifted to Nottingham. And he, in an article in 2016, which is one of the articles on the screen here, argued that the concept of the Malay world carries some problematic associations. In Southeast Asian studies, it has been situated in the archipelagic region of the south rather than the mainland to the north. Nevertheless, the cultural geographies of the Malay world are not delineated by boundaries of nation states. Rather, the cultural geography of the Malay world is less concerned with disruptions of abrupt borders. Do we need to pause if we... do I click? Do I click? Is that right? Okay, I continue. Is that right? Thank you for your patience. So the geography of the Malay world is less concerned with the disruptions of abrupt boundaries than spatial continuities. Although changes in the cultural geography of the Malay world are discernible, they are less sudden and sharp and are more nuanced and gradual. So another of my interlocutors, Sunil, who's now based in the States, he makes the important point that although the Straits of Malacca represents the most intensive point of interaction between the southern edge of the Bay of Bengal's western littoral and the Malay world, the boundaries of both are neither fixed nor exactly coincided. Those of you who haven't familiarized yourself with the remarkable work of Ronette Ricci, whose analysis of translation deeply impacted the conceptual framework that I used to analyze the way in which bilingual Malay Muslims in South Thailand use Thai vocabulary when talking about Islamic rituals. She's written some fascinating studies of Malay diasporas in Sri Lanka, which is part of a wider project looking at the phenomenon of exile during the colonial era, beginning, of course, with the Dutch, who pursued this policy on an industrial scale. And so those are my interlocutors, and recommend those works to all of you if you want to read more.
Who's Emily?
Sunil Amrit. He's a Cambridge graduate. Tim Harper did a study of the Bay of Bengal, looking at movements across the Bay of Bengal specifically. Okay, so let's just do a bit of work on context. So basically my article and the presentation that is based on this article is going to be looking at the registered mosques in Bangkok, and about how that tells us a bit about the size and the spread of the Malay community in Bangkok. And this is going to be followed by some analysis and summaries of the findings of a guy called Edward Van Roy, who published a remarkable book. It's published by Silkworm Press, Siamese Melting Pot, Ethnic Minorities in the Making of Bangkok, which is a tremendously important, in fact, if you did have an acquisition policy and you wanted to get some great analysis on ethnic change, ethnic defection, ethnogenesis in Thailand, this would be the textbook to use. So let's just go through and remind ourselves about, in fact, we're not going to be reminding ourselves, we're going to be informing ourselves of the size and the distribution of the Malay subjects of Siamese kings, which became citizens after the important constitutional changes in 1923. And so here is a table as the disastrous dyslexic. I'm a visual thinker, and therefore need to leverage that visual aspect when we are presenting. PowerPoint presentations tend to make for powerless and pointless presentations, especially if they have too much text. And so there are a number of estimates, or more correctly, guesstimates, provided by a number of French and British travellers to the region. Now, Eric, I'm sure the French were far more systematic than the British. Okay, so let's just assume that that was the case. And so we can see these begin in the beginning of the 19th century. This was just before the Bernese Treaty between Great Britain and the Siamese, which opened up Siam for trade, and led to limited. Yes, we won't go down that rabbit hole. And so we can see here that these are in thousands. These are guesstimates in thousands. The guesstimates range tremendously from 1822. Which where Crawford claims there were 15,000, which is absolutely ridiculous. We can see a growing consensus about there being between. Here we go. I just need to do this, and is that what I do? Okay, sorry, here we go. So we have a number of people guesstimating that there would be about 1 million Malays in Siam. Now, obviously, this is well before the Anglo-Siamese Treaty, which ceded Kedah, Kelantan, and Terengganu to British Malaya. And so after Kedah, so these numbers include the population of Kedah, of Terengganu, and British Malaya. Suffice to say, Malays constituted a large ethnic minority in Siam, surpassed only by the Chinese. So that is an important point to make. This table is again a summary from Edward Van Roy, and it is specifically looking at the ethnic population of non-Chinese ethnic minorities in Bangkok, and this is our focus, between 1782, 1851 and 1910. And the numbers are there on the screen for you. I don't need to gobble up my precious time by reading something that you can read yourself. So, but wanting to point out that although we're specifically interested in Malay minorities in Thailand, and we can see that after Malay minorities, ethnic Jam, a significant minority, followed by Persians, Arabs being a lot less numerically significant, and a number of ethnic groups from present-day Indonesia are also counted. But again, compared with the numbers of Malays, these are relatively small. Yeah.
For the Cham, the Muslim Cham?
Yes, that's the assumption. I mean, Malays would refer to. You'll see Khmer down there. So Khmer are Buddhists. Thais refer to Khmer, and Jam, so Jam are Muslims. Yeah.
Okay. So I just came back from Vietnam. I went for free work.
Yes.
In the Cham community, there were two. The Balaman Cham were Hindu.
Yes.
Something like Hindu. And Bani Cham was something like Muslim.
Yes, it's a best. Yeah, and I'll be referring to some of the work recently done on that community at the end of my talk. So it's very, very interesting. Yeah.
The view on Islam is quite different.
No, it's quite remarkable. Yeah. Yes, it is. Yeah. Yeah. Good. Okay. So this is arguably the most interesting piece of demographic data. I mean, obviously, demographic data. It's problematic to be assessing the veracity of demographic data collected at the beginning of the 20th century based on standard operating procedures and compliance in the 21st century. And so, but this is a remarkable piece of this is a remarkable data set for a number of reasons. So this is these are a series of infographics which I have done based on the analysis by a guy called Volker Grabowski, who's at the University of Hamburg. And he has analysed the last census done by the Siamese government in 1903 that counted ethnic minorities. This is a remarkable piece of work. That's the good news. The bad news is that the part of the country that I am specifically interested in, namely Bangkok, was not included in this partial census. And you'll see, if I could get my mouse up here, you'll see that in the blank Monton, which was the administrative units that existed at the beginning of the 20th century, all of the northeast, most of the north, and Bangkok were not included. But let's have a look at this map, and let's just I'd be interested to know whether anyone wants to offer some observations from this ethnic infographic. Does anyone want to just offer any observations? Is there anything that might surprise you about the distribution of the Malay population in Siam in 1903?
Perhaps due to the long historical relation between Bangkok and the southern the Patanis, whenever the Patanis and the Cantonese oil house, and we wanted to install the new king, they have to first and foremost seek an approval from the Bangkok. So I think that's basically the transport of Tunde, or the transport of quite numbers of entourage. Maybe that's some of the demographics.
So is anyone surprised? Let me just ask the more specific question. Is anyone surprised? Now, these Monton are the lines of the administrative, the political geography of the peninsula is a bit complex, and we don't need to bother ourselves there. But does anyone share my surprise at the size of the Malay majority up into the peninsula at a place near Chumpon? Is anyone as surprised as I am about that? I think this is quite remarkable. And this is,
There's another thing that reminds me. You see who's doing the census.
It's the British census.
The British did in 1871. They did the census of straight settlement.
Yes.
Okay. At first, they have the categories of the groups or ethnic groups or whatever groups you want to call them in alphabetical order in 1871. And then 10 years later, in 1881, they decided to collapse into 3 or 4 groups within which there are subgroups. So Malays, they got Javanese, Buginese, and all those from the island. This is where I find the article by our friend at
Charles Hirschman.
His article on his critique about Malay world, the concept of Malay world, cultural geography, Sumit Mandal. Yeah? So Sumit Mandal didn't go through all the census. He just went through all the writings. So this way I feel that you have a lot closer to the reality of the time, because people were actually dealing with individual living people and trying to classify them who they are. So I am afraid that this Malay notion that the British adopted is based on a collapsed notion of Malay.
Well, that's a very interesting point, and I think it would be a very interesting project to look, because there's a book written by Tamara Luce, Subject Siam, which looks at the way in which the Siamese co-opted British expertise in administering their
Yeah.
colonies
Yeah.
when they wanted to consolidate
Yeah.
and update and modernize the way in which they manage their ethnic and religious and linguistic minorities. And so the census would have been based on the recommendations of the British advisors. I mean, so it would be a very nice study to be comparing
Yeah.
this census with the census in British Malay at the
You
time.
see, because the British Malay statistics, they begin with state settlement, then
Mm.
they move to census federated Malay states, and then they move to British Malaya. So it's quite interesting evolution of the way they organize the census and also the categories. So finally, in 1921, they decided there are only 4: Malay, Chinese, Indian, and others.
That's convenient. That's good,
Yeah.
isn't it?
So there's a lot of bureaucratic efficacy
Yes.
that is motivating
Yes.
the organization of people's categories.
Yes. Yes.
So this is where when the Malays fight the Chinese in Malaysia, I just laugh at them because I don't know which Chinese they're fighting against or which Malays they are friendly with.
Mm.
So it's quite interesting
Yeah.
the way religion, politics,
Yeah.
and ethnicity comes into play because of census.
That's right.
I still consider census
Mm.
is the key to understand what happens in Malaysia.
So we can see up here, we can see, I really enjoyed your comments and as well as everyone else's, but this census is remarkable. I mean, it counts the number of elephants there are, how many oxen there are, and it includes not only, I mean, obviously it's counting people, but look at that, it's got the number of hajis. Yeah, and it counts the number of hajis. And so during the time that the census was taken, the far southern provinces, Malay-dominated provinces at the time would have been Patani, Naratiwa, Yatla, Satur, and Songkhla. You can see that was all subsumed under the Monton Nakhon Si Thammarat. And I remember attending that conference in Nakhon with you and our dear friend Wan Zawawi a few years ago. So 2,400 hajis in Nakhon Si Thammarat. But we can see in Ayutthaya, the Grungkau, 300 hajis, 5,000 Malays in Ayutthaya. Now, Bangkok wasn't counted, but this is quite remarkable. Right. Graham, you're late. Graham, you're in big trouble. Shamsul and I are taking notes. Yeah, we just noted. But Graham, we can't hear you, so that's good for you. Good for us, I mean. Yeah, so, and again, we don't want to ring that detail one too many times, but this is a remarkable...
Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
But this distribution from 1903, based on your observation over the years, where would the Malay concentration be?
Well, I mean, that's a completely different topic. We're looking at the issue of ethnic change and ethnogenesis. This is an exercise of iceberg tip. This is an iceberg tip tour where we are pointing out the tips of all the icebergs that need to be studied properly. So give me a few masters and PhD students, and we'll get it done in 3 or 4 years.
Politically, we bottom from Malaysia.
Well, we start in Malaysia first. Who are the Indian?
And we are.
Are they all the same? No.
Right, enough about you guys. Back to me. This is what happens when you open the mic out, isn't it? But just to reiterate the point, in 1903 in Ayutthaya, which is approximately 100 kilometers north of Bangkok, so Bangkok is not included in the census. Look how many Malays there are. They are counting 5,000 Malays. Yeah, so this is now obviously census data is it's problematic, okay? But I think this is a remarkable data set. And I often refer to, when I'm talking about studying Muslim minorities in the 19th century and the particularly the 18th century and the 19th century, it's all about aggregating the fragments because we just have to do that work with the sources. This is another source which I think is worth including, and this does include Bangkok. So this is some data from the directory for Bangkok and Siam, and it's the 1914 edition, and it counts, although most of the mosques in Thailand, 260 of them, now Pattani includes present-day Narathiwat, Pattani and Yatla, and probably parts of southern Songkhla and Satun as well. But there are obviously 260 mosques. That's approximately 47% of the national total of registered mosques in Thailand in Siam in 1914. But I want to point a number of things out. Oh, after that, we've got a number in the Kota Tamarat. Then we've got 81 in Phuket. As we go further up, there are some other places. Chumpon, there are 7. But in Bangkok, how many are there? 76 mosques registered. And in Ayutthaya, north of that, again, a large number of mosques. Okay, so what I did, census, I mean, apologies to, you know, His Majesty's government in Thailand, but Thai census data is deeply problematic. I mean, there are times when you do the analysis, the population, the Muslim population actually goes down, despite everyone knowing, you know, we knowing about the increased fertility amongst Muslim populations compared with the Buddhist population. Sometimes it stays the same. There are sometimes it's actually dipped. So, you know, life is full of mysteries. So as a result of that, what I've done is I've taken a book out of Raj Brown's analysis she's an economic historian, and she kind of suggested that we need to pay attention to the registered mosques in the country, and that will give us a bit of an idea on the cultural geography. And so this is some data we've got here very briefly. Not surprisingly, in the far south, 65% of nationally registered mosques are in the far south, but 5% are in the wider central Thailand, with another 5% specifically in Bangkok. So there is something going on here that we need to pay attention to. So it is, those who know me know that I'm good with words but disastrous with numbers, and Shamsul should be very grateful that I didn't attempt to do a quantitative study during my PhD, because he would have had to have he would have torn his hair out. So what I've done here is I've done a infographic which very roughly counts the number of mosques, the registered mosques in metropolitan Bangkok. On the outskirts of metropolitan Bangkok, there are provinces that are not included in that administrative unit, and you'll see there, and you know, I've just increased the size of the symbols to give an idea of the size. Way out east, there are 47 mosques registered in Nong Jok region. Moving further west, we can see that there are also districts within metropolitan Bangkok where there are large numbers of mosques. Again, this is not in the article, and so I wanted to improve and include it there. So this is based on a Google, on a Wikipedia map, and if you want to look at that, I can send it to you. So this is how Central Thailand has been cut up in the past, and on the right-hand side is present provinces. We've got Pratum Thani at the top, Thonburi just north of Bangkok, into the south, Samut Prakan. Obviously, Jim Collins' student did some research on Malay communities in Nonthaburi, one of the few pieces of empirically rich research done on Muslim populations in Bangkok, which expands our picture. And again, we can see here the number of mosques where they are distributed outside of metropolitan Bangkok. Suffice to say, this is a significant, they are a significant Muslim minority How do I go to the next slide here? Oh, here we go. Okay, so the other part of the picture, which explains how Malays got to be in Central Thailand, is the presence of Malay communities in Ayutthaya. And so these are two very well-known French and Portuguese maps, and you will see the way that they locate Malay villages. One is on the east side of the Chao Phraya River, and the other is on the west, including also other minorities, including Cham, Chinese, Makasaris. So one of the first, the earliest Muslim minorities, specific, I would argue, probably Malay minorities, or they may have been Cham. Numerically, Malays and Cham, they were both involved in the Cham. It's called the Asar Cham, the Grong Asar Cham, which is the Cham Volunteer Corps, which in which Cham and Malay Muslims are served. It was a militia organized by the state, and I'm going to let this person in. Admit. This is a mural. Thai murals are a very, very interesting source of data about everyday life. And so on Thai Buddhist temples, in the walls of Buddhist temples, you will see a number of remarkable paintings of everyday life. For instance, there is a temple in Songkhla that depicts Shia Muharram celebrations with all the regalia, and it's a Buddhist temple, which was an old one. And so what we have here is we have a temple mural that has a river scene, and in the middle of this river scene, and now I can't move my thing. Let me try and do this. Apologies for the clunkiness. In the middle of that mural is a raft, and look who was sitting in this raft. On the raft is a Muslim guy with a gabiyot wearing a sarong. His kids are outside, and although they might not have worn a gabiyot, it was consistent with what the artist wanted to depict, the religious diversity of Ayutthaya. So just before the fall of Ayutthaya, there were floating markets south of the city, and when it was clear that the city was going to fall, there are some first-hand accounts that describe the way that these raft houses were cut loose from their moorings, and that they poled down the Chao Phraya River, bribing officials who were preventing people from escaping the city that was being sacked by the Burmese. And it was probably Muslim residents of these raft houses around 1767 that would have been the first Muslim residents of Bangkok. Okay, let's just move ahead a bit. Although these populations, the first Muslim populations would have come a bit earlier, we've got Edward Van Roy in his Siamese melting pot describes the origins of a number of Malay, specifically Malay Muslim communities in old Bangkok. What's interesting about Van Roy's work, which I mean is empirically very, very rich, but also fortunately for me, he leaves out a bit of stuff that I can kind of include. He interacts with a number of primary sources, but as I've kind of been hoovering up, going through all of the travel logs, right the way from the 16th century descriptions of Muslim communities in Ayutthaya and Bangkok from the 16th century. He's missed a few primary sources out, but Van Roy was interested in the Siamese melting pot in the middle of town. And you'll see in this map, which is based on a 1928 map of the railway network in Bangkok, you'll see that the off pink center is the main focus of, that's the symbolic and the spiritual hub of the city. And his reconstruction of ethnic communities in Bangkok was concentrating on the center of town that some of you may have visited. I'm going to be talking about developments out east, but he concentrates on a number of specifically Malay Muslim communities, and they are there for you. I'm not going to take my time by reading stuff you can read in the article yourself, but want to make a couple of observations. Van Roy argues, and I have no reason to have any kind of contention with him, that there were basically three stages in the development of Muslim minorities in Bangkok, and I've mentioned the first. What do I do here? I have to go here, do I? Sorry, I'll admit this person. Okay, let me go back, and I need to go back to the previous slide. How do I do that? Sorry. How do I do that? Okay, good. Okay, so there are three stages. Refugees that floated downstream from the UTR from 1767. And shortly after the fall of a UTR, there was a short interregnum referred to as the Thonburi period. And so we've got accounts of early Malay communities. You can see them up the river. Bangkok is one of them. And again, I'm not going to be reading all the names. That's not going to be a good use of our time. After the 18th century, we see a number of significant developments. So Muslim communities, the first ones were started by refugee communities from a UTR. And then there were a number of important developments in the late 18th century. The present Chakri dynasty started in 1782. There was a coup against Thaksin, who led the Thonburi interregnum. And many of you will know some of the developments that happened from 1786. I just want to pause. So one of the things that I did in Bangkok, I was in Bangkok for approximately 10 days from the 21st of May. It's the first time I've been in Bangkok since the pandemic. And one of the things that I took time to do was to go and talk with a man, and some of you may know him, Norbert Ropers, who is a senior consultant in the Burkhoff Foundation, who has been involved in a number of initiatives in South Thailand for at least 8 years. He is a very, very experienced peace negotiator. He's been in Sri Lanka for a number of years. Him and his organization have been involved in a number of remarkable peace negotiations. And he's very, very positive for the first time ever, I might add, of the prospects of a peace process in South Thailand between mainly the BRN, although there's some other groups, and the Thai state. It may or may not involve the Malaysian government, and I may as well be honest here. Even though you might not like what I'm going to say, but I hope you like the way that I'm being honest. I kind of am not sure about whether the Malaysian government is the best person to be mediating this. I personally think Indonesia has got far more experience and integrity in talking about negotiating difference. Anyway, what is the point? There is a new peace process about to start, and we must be talking about history when we talk about peace. There is a phenomenon. We live in a country. I'm from a settler society. My ancestors were evil settlers. Poor folks, ordinary folks, got the chance to go to a place where there were already people and managed to buy land that they would never be able to buy, and a whole pile of stuff happened. Not all as bad as it might have happened in the past, but we have a legacy in New Zealand. should be proud of itself for a number of reasons. I have not been sent here by the foreign, by the whatever they call it, the Foreign Affairs Department to Malaysia on a bit of a diplomatic mission. But if we don't talk about history, and if we don't talk about the fact of intergenerational trauma, there will be no peace process. If people don't get to stand up in New Zealand context to either literally or metaphorically do the haka. So when we have a Māori, when we have a Māori adat, when we have a Māori tikanga, the most important thing is that everyone gets to talk. And sometimes you need to get people's attention. And sometimes to get people's attention is you stand up and you do a war dance that says, I am here, listen to me. It is tremendously important that historians who are equally agnostic about the agenda of what Malay ethno-nationalists and Thai ethno-nationalists are doing. It is important for, and you know, it's easy for me to do because I'm just some crazy New Zealander who fell out of the space shuttle on my way to the moon and landed in Bethany a few years ago, you know. So it's very, very important for us to be talking about history. And the people that have talked most about this, and you'll know this guy's work, and if you haven't, you should. If anyone is working on Bethany, anyone is working on Kelantan, anyone working on Islam in the Malay world, they need to be reading the work, the remarkable work of Francis Bradley, who was affiliated at Atma, if I'm not mistaken, while he was doing his archival work. Thousands and thousands of manuscripts attributed to Sheikh Daud al-Fatani, and he wrote a 700 or 800 page PhD thesis under the supervision of Tong Chai at University of Wisconsin. And he has documented, amongst other things, the first-hand accounts of the conquest of Bethany, a series of wars that began in 1786. The defeat of the citadel of Buljut, and we have multiple sources, the Francis Light papers that have been digitized and been known. They've got a Francis Light relating to the British accounts of what happened in Buljut, the sacking of the citadel, the burning of the Goto, the trampling of the royal family by elephants, and I could go on and on and on. The way in which, you know, there were very, very few young men actually taken in the first wave of refugees from Bethany to Bangkok. There are a number of, and I've got some of the first-hand accounts that I've trawled through, and again, that they're in the paper trail, don't need to do that, but they are harrowing, the way in which British merchants are working at the British factory, recording another junk has come from the south. The hull was full with Malays, covered in mosquito bites and with smallpox, taken out, distributed amongst members of the royalty, children wrenched from their mothers. And these are, it is very, very important that this story is told, as well as the stories of men persuaded at the efficacy, Muslim men persuaded by the efficacy of violently pursuing their political goals, I might add.
This book, is this a book that he edited? Or?
Yeah, this is I'm on his monograph based on his PhD thesis, Forging Islamic Power and Place, the Legacy of Sheikh Daud bin Abdul Al-Fatani. Yeah.
So there are other chapters that.
This is a chapter. The second one is a chapter of a book edited by Patrick Jory on Southern Thai historiography, and this is the first page of Francis Bradley's monograph based on his a remarkable thesis. I don't know if Francis.
When was this published?
Oh, I mean, I'm sorry, I haven't memorized the year. I can I mean, oh, what am I doing? Okay, how do I do this? I go there. Apologies. So I'm sorry, that's a bit of a rant, but I think it's an important one. So after we have the first wave of refugees coming up, we have another wave in the 19th century, and they are particularly, I think that we can assume these are particularly from Kedah. You'll know that in the first, so there were 5 decades of war that began in 1786, and it was good, and the Siamese were particularly assertive in bringing the Sultan of Kedah to heel in the 1830s. What's also remarkable, and so Edward Van Roy chronicles the arrival of these the establishment of later Malay communities from Kedah. Interestingly, these communities are spread throughout Bangkok as a deliberate attempt by the Siamese to prevent former subjects of Malay sultans being close enough for them to organize some kind of revolt. And so that's the reason why they've been distributed. A young Malay, a Thai Muslim scholar wrote in Malay, PhD at University of Malaya, looking at the history of this group. And that reference is in the article that this talk is based on. And another source is, I'll just let this other person in, another source which I want to specifically mention, and I interact with in my article, is a source translated by Skinner, whose work on the Malay world you will know well.
Yeah.
At Monash, that was he was part of the Monash Mafia in the heyday of when some important people were there.
Well, there was Michael Sweet, Skinner.
Yes.
All this group of people who studied the Malay world.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So he translated a remarkable source written by a man called Luang Udom Sumbat. And he was a senior administrator serving in the government of Ramasam, the third, I hope that isn't going to drop, the third reign in the present Chakri dynasty. And this king here, this is a remarkable story. His mother was a Muslim concubine of Ramasam, who originated from Nonthaburi between Bangkok and Ayutthaya. This is just a remarkable story. And so this guy, I think the manuscript that I've got, I've digitized it, and it's 200,000 words, and it is detailed descriptions of on this day His Majesty came and he asked about when the ships were coming, and then he would ask for information, be given information, and so we have verbatim this guy having dictated to his secretarial staff about the things that the Ramasam was saying. And so this is a remarkable source, and it's remarkable for a number of reasons that hardly anyone cites it. You've got, this is a Thai primary source that's been translated into English, and like you have to go and to find it in some university library and scan it and digitize it, because it's just one of these books that's just been forgotten, but empirically incredibly rich, giving us a window into the attitude, the policies of the king, and the details of what he said, are pretty harsh. They talk about the indignation about these Malays having rebelled against him, and he talks about, we need to get one of our Malays. In other words, we need to get people from Terengganu, Kelantan, Patani, or further north to come and administer this. Mentioning insecurities about the depopulation of the region, because the British are right on the doorstep. If we don't go in there and administer it, we are going to be finding ourselves being very, very vulnerable, which is actually what eventually happened. Mentioning the number of slaves that were taken, the number of ships, how long these ships took, He has a remarkable discourse between the head of the Grom Asajam. His name was Pratya Rajawangsan, who was the leader of this Jam and Malay military militia, who Ramasam directly gave instructions to about the care of these Malay exiles. For instance, is there enough room in the mosque for them? Okay, make sure that they receive medical attention, give them enough to eat, don't let them die, and you are responsible for giving these out to the royal families who are involved in administering chalei labor, which will be involved in two things: the building of canals and converting forests into rice production. And then, so this is a map of the fort of Kedah. So this is right on your back doorstep, Dr. Anis. This is a Thai map on the right-hand side with a Thai transcription of the fort in Kedah under siege by the Siamese. A remarkable piece of. Okay, so I think that I'm running out of time soon, and you will need to shut me up, Shamsul, not to put it indelicately. You'll need to shut me up.
Suffer for 10 more minutes.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah. Okay, so I mentioned just now the way in which we can correctly assume that the wars initiated by the first three kings of the Chakri dynasty, which are most commonly referred to in Thai as Ramaning, Ramasong, and San, they engaged in an aggressive series of military campaigns, subjugating subject vassal states that disappointed them during the time that Ayutthaya was conquered by the Burmese, re-establishing territorial integrity, punishing provincial governors and elites for their inconsistencies and disappointments. And they brought slaves, captives, which in Thai are called chalei, up to the central provinces for a number of reasons. And it was not just from the Malay South. These were from all over the north, from Khmer regions, including Jam, Lao regions, Lana regions, as well as the Malay South. And they were brought to the capital to do what? To do two things. To be involved in civil works, most importantly, the construction of canals, and to convert forest into productive rice paddy. Okay, and so this book, I'm in the process of writing up. In fact, I'll be writing it with Gray and doing a similar thing. Looking at travel accounts of the upper south, north of Patani, and the way in which travellers in the 18th and 19th century described and met Malay minorities. But this guy has done an anthology. This is Bernard Tawil, has done an anthology of travel descriptions in the Central Plains. And at one point, he relates some American, I think they were American Presbyterian missionaries, having traveled along this very, very important canal. And you may remember in my reconstruction of registered mosques in Bangkok, the way that out here, and I don't know whether you can see the cursor, way out east here in the provinces, the districts, of Nong Jok and Minburi, the way that there is a large concentration of mosques out here. And these people traveled along this new canal, and it's called the Saen Saep Canal. And so those of you who've been to Bangkok, right in the middle of Bangkok is a place called Pratu Nam, and there you can get a boat that will take you all the way out east. And that was the main highway back at that time. And I've got Malay manuscripts. I've got Jawi, handwritten Jawi manuscripts from communities all along, not all along, but I've got some significant handwritten Jawi manuscripts written by people now in their 80s who lived in this district of Bangkok at a time when Malay was still spoken and Jawi, Kitab Jawi were used in Bangkok and Jawi was still written. Isn't that a remarkable story? Which for some of you may be old news, but for some of you perhaps not. And so this American couple traveled along and they made some very interesting. So it mentions here Cochin Chinese and Malay villages. And then as we see along here, we've got a whole pile of Malay settlements. Yeah, so, and this cartographic material is something which for a number of years now, I've tried to expand the units of analysis. I haven't diminished my commitment to ethnographic fieldwork, but I kind of realized that, and all of this line of inquiry happened very serendipitously. I stumbled into studying the cultural geography of Islam in Thailand during the course of me studying doing a multi-sided study of Sufi Tariqat in Thailand. All of a sudden, I began to come across all of these Malay aspects of Malay material culture, Kitab Jawi and Tariqat with links to the Malay world. And that made me think, oh my goodness, where did all this come from? And because of the lack of primary sources that are easily accessible, I've begun to collate maps and census data to help me along with this. I could read. I was going to read aspects of my conclusion, but I might have a go at it. But if I read it, it'll make me look like I'm really well prepared and more scholarly rather than doing the extemporaneous thing. Okay, so I say in my conclusion, Malay and Muslim studies in Thailand, although it's, you know, Muslim minorities, I would argue, are the most extensively studied Muslim minority in mainland Southeast Asia, particularly compared with those in Myanmar and those in Cambodia. Malay and Muslim studies have suffered from having worked too long in silos of these sub-disciplines. So in this paper, I've curated a series, I've curated a diverse range of fragmentary primary and secondary sources referring to Malays in Central Thailand, especially metropolitan Bangkok, for the following reasons. Although appreciative of Edward Van Roy's social history of Muslim minorities in Bangkok, I've added a number of sources that he hasn't included in the study. Moreover, I pointed out that the vast majority of Bangkok's mainly Malay Muslim minority are concentrated in the eastern districts along the Saen Saep Canal, which were missed by, which was not included by Edward Van Roy, who was more concentrated on the centre of Bangkok. Revisionist historiographies require placing the movement of Malay war slaves of chalei described above in the wider context of the Siamese empirical expansion and the sakdina system, which I haven't included in this talk for a number of reasons, but it's the organisation of labour under a feudal Siam, where elites were given certain numbers of slaves. Some of them only had to work for them for 6 months. Some of them had to work for the state. Some worked personally for elites. The paper trails that I've provided have been motivated by concerns to assist others to contribute empirically grounded and theoretically sophisticated perspectives on both the cultural geography of Islam in Thailand and the northern extremities of the Malay world. As I've argued elsewhere, the former has been hamstrung by historical amnesia about the Malay cultural heritage of Malay Muslims in inverted commas, and these can unproblematically be divided between Thai Muslims concentrated along the border with Malay Muslims in the border and Thai Muslims further north. Bangkok's Muslim diasporas, most of whom were descendants of war prisoners, resemble in remarkable ways the origins of Sri Lankan Malays described by Ranit Ricci. The case study of Central Thailand's Malay diaspora confirms Mandal's thesis that notwithstanding the presence of incremental changes in the cultural geography of the Malay world, these are nuanced as well as gradual, rather than sudden or sharp. Like other linguistic, ethnic, and religious minorities, this Malay diaspora, who's lived far from South Thailand for generations, have lost their mother tongue. Most have lost their mother tongue and cooperated with the Thai state's project of what Graham refers to as ethnogenesis. As such, the vast majority are now monolingual Thai-speaking Thai Muslims. And none of this should prevent Thai and Malay studies specialists from engaging in an intentionally interdisciplinary approach to revising the cultural geography of Islam in Thailand and this corner of the Malay world. And with those comments, I'll conclude. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Chris. I don't have questions, but I have some opinion about what you have discussed quite in detail. I believe you have the luxury of all this empirical evidence at your disposal to be able to not even establish something, but to question most of what has been accepted as general statement, about the Malay in Thailand, Malay Muslim, and in the light of the struggle. But I'm more interested in an analytical struggle rather than the struggle of reality. Yeah? I think this analytical struggle has actually shaped the way we understand, the way Malay scientists uses positivism to study Islam. See, you know how this epistemological notion of positivism influenced the way some Muslim scientists read the Quran. It's full of formula. So that's what I mean by analytical struggle. What are the levels from listening your very detailed paper, which I a bit envious, because you have all this material at your disposal, and your ability to read in Thai is an extra, I think, advantage that you have more than the scholars that I know. Yeah? So number one, when is the transition from Siam to Thailand, and now how does the transition actually dictate the way the empirical data, like for example, just now we have the British influence and we have the Thai royal influence. When is this absolutist ruler becomes a more modern ruler? Is it 1935 or before that? Because what happened is that at the micro level, the transition of all these terms and all these categories that we have on boundaries, there is another layer of activities going on at the bottom, which is escape of all those. Right? They don't care about all those because they still travel, they still go up to northern Thailand, and that's why the word diaspora sometimes doesn't sit comfortably, because it may not be diaspora. It may just be roaming area of the Malay in the Malay world, except that the modern history writing has not, and historiography has not focused on this, because they're all Indonesian, they are Malaysian, and those in love with Bali. Okay, so Bali-centered anthropology with Clifford Geertz and Gary.
Yeah.
So you can imagine my struggle as a person interested in the Malay world. I find it, that was my first struggle when I took over the Institute Alam dan Tamadun Melayu. What is this analytical issue that we have to address? So that's when I started to talk in terms of not Malay studies, but Malay world studies. Because Malay studies is too ethnic based, too British based, too census based. But Malay world study is a lot more historiographical based. So that allowed me to explore deeper in the sense that why we call them Thai Malays is because now in modern Thai, but actually to them, when they go Kedah, people move to middle of Thailand. It's not about Thailand. It's just another trip they are making from Malay state. But at that time, there is no Malay state in the so-called now Thai area and the Malay state in the Malay area. But they are all Malay states before the demarcation between Malay and Thailand. So it's very interesting for me because I don't read Thai, so I feel very envious in the fact that these answers can only be found in Thai because they became to be recorded, absorbed, embedded in the Thai society. They have no choice. Kedahan or whatever you call them, when they move to Buddhist religion, they are embedded into the everyday practice of the Buddhist. As you see the photo, the first photo you showed us is the embedding of Islam into what is Buddhist world, So they have no choice. So I think it is a challenge for researcher, I think, to begin at two levels. Number one, the challenge is the analytical challenge. How do we undo these difficulties, Like, for example, we are very clear when is the pre-colonial and colonial in Malaysia, because the state settlement, federated Malay states, and then unfederated Malay states, the census follows this evolution, but not in Thailand, because they are not, being colonized so-called like the way we were in Malaysia. So, but when we meet,
What it is actually, there is.
yeah. So when we mix this, then we realize there are some analytical issues we have to draw. I think what you did today is to raise this analytical problem. That's basically I can see. So I'm very grateful for that because it reinforces my own suspicion that this academic sometimes, because of their PhDs, they're so narrow-minded and they just want to concentrate on what they want to do. And then suddenly they're being lifted up there as the great thesis, but actually they consolidate the difficulties in analysis. So this is what I see. And then you use the word Malay exile. Exile quite simply means there's already a nation state that people go. I mean, usually they use that, moving from already nation state and move to another nation state. And the fact that Thailand, you probably what interested is Siam stroke Thailand. This is the way that I read the way you Thailand science. So Rama the fifth, for example, this is what I'm thinking. So, and I'm very grateful for the interrogation you did into these categories, and then the excerpts of extracts from a quantitative material that is not accessible to many before, because they are basically
This is all of
yeah. So, but then they refer to the Taiwan.
yes.
So this is what I mean.
Yeah.
So unless you are able, so in a sense, the author will have to read and interpret the Thai material in the English version. So this is a two-layer thing or three-layer thing that we do with Japanese cartoonization or stuff. So I find this fascinating, and I'm sure this is. I think you have a big good kita because it's
South. And I Okay, so do we need to open it up for discussion? I don't know how we do
Yeah,
that.
no, I think
What do I do?
you just
How do I open it up for discussion? Does anyone, well, how about while we're
Yeah.
getting that organised, does anyone here in the room want to add?
If I can add, I think just listening to Prof. Samson and what
Yeah.
you have presented, Chris, I'm just wondering, there's obviously, like what Professor saying, there's a lot more to be done.
Yes.
You've just given us the tip of the iceberg. But I'm wondering even to see, the question that I asked earlier, to know the comparison where the Malays are 1903 to now. Despite that you said the census 1903 did not look at Bangkok, but the 1914 data showing that 76 mosques are there.
Yeah.
Even looking at number of mosques growth in all those places can give us some indication. I also would be interested to see, because here we're making the assumption the Malays are Muslim.
I think that particularly, okay, so a number of the reasons why I'm comfortable about that assumption, I'm talking particularly out east. I mean, so in the centre of town, okay, so there are some communities that were associated with Arab diasporas. There are some Shia communities, there are Jam communities in the centre.
Who are also Muslim.
Muslim, but I mean, there was this enormous influx of Malays from the south over these 5 decades of war, and they were sent to do civil work and convert. As I've said before, I don't need to reiterate this. So I think that we can, before 1786, we can assume that it was maybe less ethnically, less overwhelmingly Malay, and after the 1824 Burney Treaty, more Indian Muslims came in. And the Burney Treaty didn't allow Burmese to come in. That was so, but then we have more Indians turning up, but overwhelmingly Malay. And
well,
you can,
it's legal, from legal.
that's right.
So it's not that easy. It's not that straightforward. That's what I said before the idea of census is introduced. There are people who are moving around for different reasons.
Yeah.
So we have to create sociological categories to capture these.
Yeah.
That's where we freeze these things. They are frozen. So I think that's what Anis is trying to figure out.
Yeah.
The freezing of the categories by different people, and then they further frozen or ossified by census.
Yeah.
So it goes that way.
That the evolution basically shows us the growth.
Okay. Any other question, Lenny?
Yeah, what about the term exile? I would like to follow or echo the explanation.
I have no problem with you referring to these people as exiles. I mean, they were graciously provided one-way transport. So how else would you refer to them? I mean, these were I'm talking specifically about Malay communities in Central Thailand, and we see this. I mean, it's the numbers. In terms of the distribution, about where they are, the number of mosques, the size of it, and everyone, if you go and do field work in those communities, they will say that's where we came from.
If we have the data before that particular census,
No, it's
then we can see that there's a move.
but that data
The
doesn't.
exile from Kedah, whatever. But
Well, I think the issue here is not so much exile. It's just that when you use the word exile in modern sense, it's political category.
Well, I
people
mean,
who escape, but this is not people escaping.
okay, so what would you suggest? Just slave? What would you suggest? I mean, I'm very, very happy to.
Well,
I'll contact the journal and just say,
this
listen, let's start
general,
again.
general theory or concept we have been using in the early part on describing yourself as settlers and hosts,
Yeah,
in
sure.
that context. So these are Malay settlers in Central Thailand. They are settlers.
Okay, no, great. No, that's good.
then it explain.
Yeah. No. The word exile help us to find a new word for it.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
I think that's, and based on a already existing host and society, host and settlers. Settler colonialism is a big thing written in about Israel, about
Yes.
So
Yes.
it's quite interesting. So I think to escape the modern notion of exile, then we have to call it UNHCR. So
To give the refugee card.
so we are now,
Retrospectively.
thinking about the settlers, and they're actually settlers.
Yeah.
But all the people, but their settler is within a region where they're familiar with. This is circular migration. So the theory of migration should be inside here. And not for your work, but that when they talk about cultural geography, they are talking about circles of migration.
Yeah.
So this is what we fail to see in history. The historiography is they mention about migration, but they don't describe the notion and different type of migration. So a Malay moving from what is now Indonesia to Malaysia. Okay, now it's Indonesian illegal immigrant. It's quite different from the Chinese who move from a Chinese civilization to another region. If they go to Arab, they are not definitely belonging to the Arab diaspora or civilization. So I think this concept sometimes make our life difficult because there are so many modern connotation and contemporary connotation. This is what happened in Turkey now. You know, when there are thousands of Syrians, I mean millions, Syrian, and then from Jordan, from Israel, from Palestine. So suddenly it's not about Middle Eastern.
No.
Then they have to look for a term, Muslim or what. So
The common term.
so this is the Department of Migration, not Department of Immigration, Department of Migration in Turkey. Interesting.
If I'm not mistaken, in one of your pictures, there is also
Which one is it? This one here, or okay? Let me just work out how I'm going to change this.
the subcategory of Malay, and there is this subcategory of Makassar.
Oh, this is the map from the UTR. Yeah. These are ethnic communities in the UTR. Yeah.
The one forms the Sulawesi.
Yeah.
So they are not considered as Malay.
No, and I mean they were again. I mean, this is just another example. The Siamese differentiated between the Jam and the Makassarese and the Javanese, and the sources are consistent about who refers to as who. And I mean, the Makassarese were involved in a rebellion. I mean, you know that a Khmer king converted to Islam.
Yeah.
And so the Jam and the Makassarese during the time of Narai were very keen on seeing that development repeated in the UTR. And this was at a time when Muslims were in privileged positions as basically the head of foreign trade, and there was a site of a massacre. I think it was, I can't remember the year.
Yeah.
There'll be someone listening, like I can see Raymond Scoop in the hill would have remembered the year that this happened in, and I'll get it wrong, and I'll completely lose my integrity. He's laughing, which is good. I can't. How you doing, Ray? I'm sorry I can't hear you, but I can see your smiling face. Yeah. So again, this is, and in fact, I'm writing up about. I'm reconstructing Muslim presence in the UTR at the moment. That's one of the projects that I'm doing. Do we need to unplug this so that we can hear people on here? I think that if we do that, I might be able to hear others if there are people who want to.
You put it there, but you just ask them to.
Okay, is there anyone, Ray?
They can also write on the.
Can Ray? Can you? Oh, here we go. Yeah.
Notifications and draft permissions.
I can
One-time
hear you.
notifications.
Yeah. Go for it.
Well, I really enjoyed and profited from your paper and from your talk about your paper. And you really helped me understand a lot more about the communities and brought me up to date on many of the issues there that are involved in ethnicity and locations. And I think your correction of Van Roy was very, very apt in that he didn't concentrate on the eastern areas, you know, of Bangkok, where there's a lot of Malay Muslim settlements there. And I taught at Ramkhamhaeng University. I taught linguistics there for 2 years. And that's when I was doing my field work. and that was right in the area of Saen Saep Canal. And I interviewed a lot of the Muslims in that area, and I found that some of them were bilingual.
Yes.
They could speak both Malay and Thai, mainly among the older generation.
Yeah.
But then, and I don't speak Malay, and I don't read Malay at all either. But I understood. I see that you referred to Chaiwat Misatan's dissertation.
Yes.
And I don't know what you think about that dissertation. It was a bit repetitive to some extent. He did it at the University of Malaya.
Yeah.
And I recommend that I was able to translate it through Word. Do an English translation. It didn't come out perfectly, of course, but I learned a lot about his impressions about the Malays there and the Malay population in Bangkok and surrounding areas. And he tends to think that there's a certain amount of assimilation going on, and that has been going on for many years there among the Malay and Muslim populations. But, he was concentrating on the fact that Malay is still used, linguistically, still used by quite a few people in the communities.
I mean, I was in a taxi. I was in a Rotua. I had to hire a Rotua van in Patani. The guy was from Nontapuri, the community that he comes from in Nontapuri. They still speak Malay.
Right.
And they speak specifically they still speak in the Malay dialect. If you look at some of the work done by some economic historians, people who were bidding for teak concessions in the UTR, they wrote their name and they were Ishmael. So I mean, they're Kelantanese, they're Patani. I mean, if you read the way that they write their names, I mean, it was clear that these are Malays from Patani, Kelantan, speaking in that dialect that I speak.
Right. Yeah. It's interesting. Yes. You mentioned someone's name. It was a Western name that was somebody that was doing studies in metropolitan Bangkok. Did you mention somebody that I didn't get the name?
You just have to read the paper, I'm afraid, Ray. I tried to remember I'm afraid. As soon as I've got one publication done, I'm kind of on to the next one, and everyone says, "Oh, you know how you wrote that thing?" And I think, "Oh man, that sounds good. Did I write that, or was it something else?"
I'm talking about, you mentioned them tonight in your talk. At one point, you
Man,
mentioned
Roy, or are you?
no, not Roy. No, it was. I didn't get the name. That's all right. That's
Okay,
no
it'll
problem.
be in the paper. Yeah.
No problem. Yeah,
So
but
maybe I should just interrupt you, Ray, and just explain that you were the granddad of Muslim studies in Thailand. You're one of the patriarchs. Your work on Muslim reformism in Bangkok is basically year zero in terms of English scholarship on Thailand's Muslim minorities, particularly in Central Thailand. So it's a great privilege to have you join in this very humble seminar.
yes, yes. Well, thanks for inviting me. I really appreciate it, and I'm really learning a lot.
Even if I got the date wrong the first time, thanks to our next office.
Yeah.
So where are you now, Reno? If I may know.
I live in the St. Louis area
Okay.
in the U.S.
Okay.
and it's almost midnight here now.
Wow, goodness.
Supposed to get on midnight. So,
Good.
Thank you.
Okay, so I was just wondering, are there any other people who have zoomed in who want to ask a question. I prefer questions than comments, but I guess I could hear a comment. Anyone else?
No?
No one there? Okay, that's just fine. So I'll hand it over to the moderator.
Okay, there are two possibilities why there's no response or more response. I think
They've fallen to sleep,
people are just beginning to understand. what's
playing
going
angry
on.
birds. Maybe they're playing angry birds.
Yeah, beginning to digest. Only Raymond could understand the details and the difficulties of doing this work. Yeah, so I think that's why his extended response is very precious to us to listen. Yeah, and I think the other reason is we have graduate students who are listening. So I think most of them are just beginning to learn different ways of looking at a certain area that they already know popularly, but not academically. So I think we are very grateful for the presence of the students, which enrich us. So, and I would like to say thank you to Chris for making time to come here and share with us his latest findings, his ideas, and his reconceptualization of Thai Malays, and what does it mean to the study of Malay world and so on. And I think, thank you to you, and you're welcome again anytime. Thank you very much.
Delighted.
Okay.
Good to be back. Okay. Very good. So I shut that. Leave me.